Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Naia Lax updates. I guess you can call us on episode 2 of continuing on the preseason, off-season notes. Welcome in, Tucker, once again.
Yeah. Excited to be here once again. We're excited for episode numero dos, the second episode of the NAI Lax Updates podcast for this year. Like you said, preseason. I'm going to be honest, there's been a lot of stuff going on. The NAI Lax world has been heating up at a much earlier time, which is awesome for us because we have more stuff to talk about. And we want to thank you guys for the awesome numbers on the first go around with the show. Several hundred people viewing it last time we checked. Lots of great comments, lots of great questions, great feedback all around. So thank you guys in advance for that communication, because that allows us to build upon this show. And we were talking about this show already all week in anticipation for it. So this is going to be a fun one for you. First up, how was your weekend? What did you do? Did you consume any lacrosse?
I'm gonna be honest, not too much lacrosse going on this weekend. Mostly Christmas shopping for my son going on this weekend. So
Okay.
How about yourself?
The fun parenting stuff for you. I was good. I went down to Cincinnati about 2.5 hours. I'm back home now in Athens, Ohio, and we drove down. My dad and I went down to Cincinnati for a box tournament. Whenever I'm back here in Ohio, I play a lot of box. Obviously, I play in the summer in Iowa, but here there's tournaments all year. And so we went down and I played in the Border Wars tournament in Cincinnati with a bunch of buddies of mine, mostly Capital University guys and Ohio State and a lot of the Ohio schools. But it's always fun to mix it up with those guys. And we played some good competition. We played some okay competition. It was kind of all over the board, as senior level box normally is. But it was great just to mix it up for a full day. Played 4 games. My body this morning felt like I couldn't get out of bed. My legs were totally locked up. I was like, man, this is what 4 games in a day feels like. Because you're used to it when you're playing youth lacrosse and stuff like that. But now as you get older, it's like, but it was good. We matched up. We ended up going 3-1, had the best record going into the championship game. Lost a tough one in the championship game to a team of almost entirely Division I guys, former Denver leading scorer, a NLL draft pick, and tons of international players. So we were stacked up. We held it. We actually beat this team in the first game of the tournament. We were like, okay, that was pretty sick. And then by the end of it, we were all gassed. But it was good because we actually we got to match up with a team, I believe, from Michigan. Shout out Park Boys if they're listening. I talked to a few of them yesterday about it. A bunch of Siena Heights guys. Special shout out to their face-off guy, who I heard is a Siena Heights guy, wearing a Harvard Community College helmet, JUCO, but the kid was tearing it up at face-off. So if you're watching right now, man, you were burning it at face-off. I'm not gonna lie, but it was fun to mix it up with some Siena Heights guys. And then I saw Lawrence Tech helmet out there, Indiana Tech helmet. So NAI was well represented at this box tournament, which is the more NAI guys we see in the box is always encouraging. It's growing on that level too. But I do love seeing the NAI helmets out there. So aside from being sore and then trying to work out today, it was an enjoyable weekend. It was full of lacrosse.
Yeah, I definitely love to hear that. I mean, I don't get to play too much lacrosse these days. I would love to play some box or something, get back into it, but
we'll get you in the box. We'll get you in the box. We'll get you in the box, and then you'll wake up the next day feeling this sore again and be like, oh man, now I know what it feels like again.
It'll be worse for me since I'm not playing anymore compared to you.
We'll throw it. Hey, maybe a box goalie, try it out. Maybe, see how you think. You can stay there and see how that works. Maybe some defense, we'll figure it out. But nonetheless, good weekend. Glad to hear you are doing some quality adulting and some quality father activities. That's good for you. And you're repping an NAI shirt right now, which we were talking about earlier. Look at that. Not too many people have that shirt. That's pretty sick. I would like to, that actually is a good talking point NAI wise. Special shout out to, who was it? Grandview and Morningside played in the NAI football championship yesterday. And I believe they were in North Carolina for it. And it was funny for those of you who don't know NAI wise, but Grandview and Morningside are a few hours away. They're both in Iowa. They're from separate conferences, both powerhouses. Grandview's actually from our conference, and they tore it up. They played a great championship game. I got to catch a little bit of that on the NAI broadcast. And the one thing I got to say that's so NAI is at the end of the game, they got their championship shirts. And it was like one NAI logo in tiny font, champions. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys. Can we just get these guys some better championship shirts? So normal NAI fashion, I guess, But anyway, whoever's listening to this that can get the Morningside University guys some championship football shirts, I think it's well in order. A great NAI representation there, and some really quality football too. As we are NAI, I guess we can talk about that there.
Yeah, shout out those guys. They literally.
So first on our list, I guess we should talk about uniforms, and this caught both of our attention. Do you want me to take the pronunciation on this one?
Yeah, apparently we've been pronouncing this name wrong this whole time, and I thought we had it right. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not so sure that they're not wrong and that we're right. You know what I mean?
That is true. So this is I'm gonna call them an expansion team, but they're another university adding NAI lacrosse, which we covered a little bit in the previous episode. This is now I'm going off the pronunciation from Google. So we think we have this right. It sounded right before, but the correct pronunciation according to Google is Multnomah University in Oregon. I believe they're outside the Portland area. So we were saying Multnomah, Google is saying Multnomah. Anyone from there, please comment on Twitter and let us know how it's pronounced according to you guys, because Google might have this completely incorrect. Anyway, the uniforms were they were out of this world.
Yeah, top 3 in the NAIA at least.
Absolutely. And they dropped the uniforms early, which we have to respect. I will also say we didn't really know much about the school, whether they were actually going to have a season this year or not. It was all kind of up in the air last time we had researched them. And since then, I've noticed social media. I've noticed a lot more pictures circulating. So it was all really perfect divine timing. And then lo and behold, on the little screen there scrolling across, there's the uniform drop. And I don't know, I think they were Nike uniforms. I'm not totally sure, but they were nice.
They were really nice. And I mean, that's always a good sign. I mean, I know it doesn't always translate on the field, but when you see that they're I would assume those cost some money. So, I mean, if they're throwing money on nice uniforms, I mean, could be a good sign of things to come.
Yeah, and I will say also looking at their Instagram page, I did find a little video of it must have been practice film or something of them getting after it. And I was also actually really impressed by their practice kits as well. They had a good look there. They had some size on their roster, I got to say. I saw a few guys just in the video quickly that I was like, you guys look like some pretty good lacrosse players. And Oregon lacrosse is growing. West Coast lacrosse is growing. So it all lines up perfectly. Nonetheless, their uniforms are amazing. Somewhere in here, if I can get it to work, hopefully I'll put a video up of those uniforms that they revealed, because they were pretty shocking for a first-year NAI program. And it also shows some pretty great support, I assume, from their administration and their university from the start.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree with you on that. I know a lot of people were asking us to give kind of our top 10 going into this week, but I don't think we know enough for that. So my idea was kind of maybe go conference by conference, and don't even have to go top to bottom, because that'll just be a whole lot at this point. Maybe go top 4 teams we see realistically in each conference, given that a conference tournament sake of winning it.
I'm also pulling up right now. I'm quickly pulling up the comments that we got on both our Twitters here to see kind of what we had, just so I can reference that as we go. Also, shout out real quick to NAI women's lacrosse updates, because I love what they're doing with the little player spotlight thing. And they just kind of came across. They had actually just a couple seconds ago, as we're recording, commented something I noticed. So shout out to them. As we go, though, you go ahead and start out. I'm going to pull up those comments in reference to what we're talking about at the same time.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I'll just start with the AAC
Mhm.
and go. There. Um, Going with it. I said I thought Kaiser would win it, and I saw their media day, which is not really something to base too much on. But I did notice some of the faces I was expecting to be like kind of the poster boys, if you want to say it, for this year's team. I didn't see them in the media day. Maybe they changed their number, and I just don't know what their face looks like too well. But it didn't look like I saw either of the senior brothers, who I thought were going to have huge seasons again. It didn't look like some of the fifth year guys are playing. So that's a
That
big.
is that's actually shocking. I didn't see their media day, and those are two guys that I agree totally expected and make a huge impact. Were they seniors last year?
So it's a little complicated because I think the older one had transferred from Union originally, but I
Okay.
mean, he definitely played at Union. I think not even my senior year. I want to say like my junior year. So he's definitely, I think he was a senior last year. The younger one may have still have some eligibility left, but I didn't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't catch either one of them on there. So that's a little bit concerning. But I still definitely have them in my top four for the AAC. But right now, I'd probably go Reinhardt, Kaiser, then Cumberland's kind of as the big three gunning for it. And then coming in at number four, I think I'd go Weber. Honestly, just
Yeah.
all the transfers they've been landing. I mean, it wouldn't be shocking if they maybe even pushed it even higher than four in that conference.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I definitely have Kaiser and Reinhardt. Those are my two. But I honestly I do think and Cumberland's continues to build, continues to get better year in, year out. Great facilities, great university, great coaching. I think they're kind of my flexible three. Obviously not knowing too much about what's going on at Kaiser or Reinhardt right now. Both are kind of in a different position. Obviously, we haven't seen any official really rosters released or anything yet. Uh, I would say those are my three as well. I don't exactly know the order, because I think they all have a shot at kind of being in those top three in a very flexible manner. I do agree though that I think Weber is up there in the top four. Um, they're kind of another one that they could bump higher than fourth. They may be able to capitalize on some guys, being lost or graduating from more, kind of iconic legendary teams. I especially see their rosters growing at a very, very, very fast rate. Obviously, where they're located, it's not hard to recruit guys because it's a beautiful location. They also have Q on the team. He's still there from last I checked. And again, their roster continues to grow. So I agree with you. Those are four. I agree with you as well. I think it's too early to kind of put them in order. And I think we may see a little bit of a mix up on the AAC side, and it might be different this year around. I think the bottom half probably stays the same. I know Montreat has gone through some coaching changes, even since the last time we looked at this. And they're a school that I think once they do rebuild, they're going to be a contender as well. I don't know so much of this year. Again, it's anyone's game at this point, but I do think that the top four are probably going to shift around a little bit more compared to past years, where the bottom half maybe stays closer to normal.
Yeah, for sure. Also, got to mention T Dub had a fantastic season last year, so they could easily be in it again. St. Andrews has been building like crazy, another one like Weber, so wouldn't be shocked to see them back in the top four of it either.
Yeah, I agree. I think St. Andrews is in a unique position. I don't know if we've addressed this before. They're in a unique position as far as NAI goes, because they were a D2 powerhouse prior to becoming NAI, kind of in their older years, and they were a very, very, very good supported D2 team. And so there's kind of a lineage of lacrosse at that school. So I think it's a matter of time until they jump into the top half of that there. They've been doing a great job recruiting from everything I've seen as well. Good support from the school, and kind of, again, a nice, cool Southern area as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then moving on to the next conference, I guess we'll go something a little bit closer to you, KCAC wise.
Absolutely. I have some new thoughts on this, I should say, since our last podcast as well. Let me think here. Okay, so First off, Steve Blair on Twitter, thank you for your comment there towards both of us after the last episode. Very constructive. I appreciate that. I totally blanked on St. Ambrose. That didn't, I don't know why I did. Apologies to them. I have many friends on that team, many new friends on that team as well. And I can tell you from everything I know, they're going to be sitting in a very good position. And it slipped my mind. I don't know why, because they're only about an hour from Clarke. We are, I don't know if we're rivals per se, in a lot of sports we have been in the past, but they're a good group of guys. They're a roster that continues to build. I know their strength and conditioning, organization side of it has bumped up to a new level this season as well. So their numbers and organization continues to build. They have, a new coach stepping in now. And so it's kind of anyone's game in that era, in that area of the KCAC. But I really do think that Ambrose could be a top contender. I looked back on the rosters here. I know last time I referenced Columbia. I think Columbia and Ambrose could be kind of neck and neck. Their roster sizes are very similar. Their playing styles historically have been similar, both very physical teams that seem to match up well. And then you kind of have William Penn also in that mix because, again, they're a deep roster. And so these teams with deep rosters with 30, 40 guys who have legs and have depth at each position, they can really compete well against each other. And those are kind of the three in my mind right now that have deep rosters are William Penn, Columbia, and St. Ambrose. And then we look at Missouri Valley. Hines took over. I don't know a perfect image of what's going on there. I have a little bit of inside information. I know some of their guys remain, some of them have graduated. I know their depth is not going to be the same as previous years. They're probably going to be kind of where we sit at Clarke right now. So you have three teams in the KCAC, all with similar roster numbers, and then the rest of the conference kind of sits with similar roster numbers. So kind of what we see in the AAC, I think, as well. You have three teams, kind of flexible in rankings, and then the rest are going to be determined by whoever plays the best is the way I kind of see it. Midland being a newer team, Morningside being a newer team, they all have potential to kind of show up, and we don't really know what to expect from them a lot of the time in the KCAC, which is a kind of a wow factor for them as well. But I feel pretty good about three being Ambrose, William Penn, and Columbia. Kind of comparable to the Morningside or to the Missouri Valley rather of the past is kind of the way I see those teams right now. And then Ottawa, I can't cross off Ottawa. I will say, shout out to the Ottawa guys out there. Every time we play you guys, no matter how many guys you have healthy or on the roster or on the sideline, you guys play a hard fought, scrappy game. You always have good goalkeepers, good tendies. It's impressive all the way around. So I think, again, Ottawa could be one of those as well. With our conference in the KCAC growing rapidly, I think the power among the conference continues to shift.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And those are actually my four exactly. I think the team that I think some people might go, well, what about this team? They're typically right up there, is kind of Benedictine. And I think that is kind of the one that I honestly have the most question marks about. It seems like the last couple of years they've been graduating quite a handful of guys. And I don't know. I don't want to call this inside info because I don't even know how true, but from what I heard, at least like score wise from the scrimmages in the fall, it kind of seemed like Columbia, William Penn, Ottawa, kind of a little bit more impressive than Benedictine was. I mean, you may have more knowledge on that, but that's kind of the info I was receiving.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hearing more or less too. I know it seems like from what I'm hearing and seeing from Benedictine's roster is they did graduate a lot of guys, and when they had that core group of guys that recently graduated, their roster was super deep because of those seniors who graduated. I know that they're rapidly recruiting, and they did have several sophomores and juniors that are going to fill in really quickly, that were getting starting time right away. I talked to a parent actually in Cincinnati yesterday whose son was being recruited by Benedictine. So they're reaching out wide. They're recruiting well and far, as I can see and hear from these parents already. I do think, though, they are kind of a question mark as well. This coach, I believe this will be his second year now. He took over kind of late into last season. So that's kind of another question mark as well. I'll be curious to see, they historically have been a powerhouse. They're very well supported by their school. They have a larger enrollment at their university as well. or at their college rather. So all those things support good roster size, but I think the same as you right now. I don't really know enough about what's going on there. They've been rather secretive. It's kind of it's going to be interesting. And then you also have in Kansas, you have St. Mary, you have Coach Dial out there recruiting as well, and bringing players in. And so they're kind of another question mark as well. I think the Kansas side of the KCAC is going to be interesting to see how it pans out this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I want to just touch on one more thing. When I looked at the Ottawa roster the other day, it looks like DeMarco, who is their star attackman, it looks like, so he's back for a senior year. And then it looks like he'll be right next to his younger brother, who's a freshman coming in. So assuming he's as good or even maybe half as good, I mean, that could be a big problem for defenses in the KCAC.
Yeah, great. That's awesome. No, it is though. DeMarco's a great player, enjoyable to play against, and class act in that sense. So I'll be also interested to see the younger DeMarco from an on-field perspective as well. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out. And I really do think that Ottawa, I think we're probably a little bit conservative in our rankings right now, just from not knowing what's going on. But they may show out with the deep roster. They historically, years where we look at the roster and we're like, oh, they only have, 15, 20 guys. They show up with 25, 30. That's typical of them to have a deep roster without anyone else knowing. So they have a big surprise factor on their side.
Yeah, definitely. And moving on to the final conference, let's talk a little bit about the WHAC. And this is kind of the one I've gone over in my head with the most. I just really don't know. And I feel like part of it is because quite a few of the teams ended early last year because of COVID. So I'm really questioning it going in. But I think clearly you have to look at Indiana Tech returning most of that roster as the clear number one. And then right after that, I see kind of a tier two. But I don't think there's it's not a 10 goal gap in tier one and tier two. Tier two could easily be tier one. And I have Aquinas and Concordia in that tier two, where I know they're both going to be very deep. Aquinas going to have 2 potential All-Americans at attack, and they're going to be pretty money there. Concordia returning the stud Hunter McCarthy. Mm-hmm. That's going to be Sam Bowling in goal returning. So they're kind of up and rising. And then after that, it gets a little questionable as to who the 4th team would be, because Madonna, a new head coach, Siena Heights returning from the COVID cancel. Lawrence Tech kind of canceled even earlier in the season last year, but I've heard they have some good players returning and some good freshmen. So real interesting. What do you think on that side?
Yeah. I definitely think I have Indiana Tech up there in the top tier. I think it's going to be hard to beat Indiana Tech. I really do. They get stronger and stronger and stronger every year, and their roster gets deeper and deeper. Constantly impressed with what they're doing on social media and everything across the board. I do kind of agree though that I don't know between, Concordia and Aquinas. I think they're going to be kind of neck and neck. It's always close games with them. They're regional games for those guys. A lot of them grew up with each other, which is kind of a fun aspect of that. I believe Dearborn returns again this year from what I was hearing from guys yesterday. I think Siena Heights is going to have a very solid team. I can even tell you from the guys that I was playing yesterday, I was impressed all around with the handful of guys from Siena Heights that are going to be on the roster this year. And then I want to lean with Siena Heights being a lot better than I even think right now. I think that they are eager to get back to it and are going to be a contender that may shock some people. But again, I think Indiana Tech is just one of those teams right now that they're up there. And then I believe Mount Vernon Nazarene is also a WHAC team now. I think this is their 2nd official year. Coach Farr out there was actually my original high school coach. So shout out Coach Farr. Yeah. If you're watching right now, man, hope you're doing well. So I'm excited to see what happens with them, with a team building in that conference. But again, I think it's going to be hard for anyone to dethrone Indiana Tech with the coaching changes going on in the conference and the expectations shifting. And there's a lot going on in the WHAC. I am really eager, though, to see Siena Heights return and see where they are. And also Dearborn, because we didn't see much of Dearborn. And they're kind of a big question mark. I have seen a lot of signings from them recently, though.
Yeah, it's definitely a good sign. It's one of those teams to kind of get back up and rolling. I have a question for you. This isn't something we talked about pre-show or
Yeah,
anything,
yeah.
but it's something I've been thinking about. Historically, like the WHAC hasn't won a lot of national titles, but they've kind of been the dominant program from kind of start to where we are now in the NAIA. But I'm kind of thinking that it seems like the AAC might be kind of pushing for that ranking coming up. What do you think on that? Think the WHAC still has the depth edge, or
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. And I think there's an interesting reason for this. And I think what's happening is more guys from my region of Ohio and Michigan are popping up on more AAC rosters. They are going towards warmer weather, which I can't blame them for. You have more schools like Weber in that setting, and then obviously Kaiser and a lot of those kind of really southern teams popping up. And so guys that grow up here, a lot of the times, if they're not going to stay close to home, they go the furthest home that they can. So the more options that pop up, and I'm sure this is going to happen with Multnomah in Oregon and the schools out in California, I think you're going to see more guys that traditionally would have gone WHAC because of availability and being close and lack of schools in warmer weather start to go to warmer weather teams, especially the AAC. So to be completely honest with you, I foresee the AAC building the most in the coming years. I also think lacrosse as a whole is growing really well in the South right now from everything I see. And so you're going to be able to recruit a lot more guys in-house in the Southern Conference. So I agree with you. I think the AAC is going to be the prevalent conference moving forward. It will be interesting, though, because so many guys here in Michigan and Ohio play lacrosse that you could stay close to home, and now you could hit an NAIA school without even trying. You could drive 40 miles between them and you could end up at another one. I mean, you got Lords up there as well. And so I tend to agree with you on this one. I think there's more expansion happening in the AAC, and I think that's appealing to a lot of players that grow up playing in colder weather and having their seasons delayed longer.
Yeah, for sure. And then moving on, I don't think we missed anything else. Do you want to go ahead and let's talk about some of the questions we got on Twitter this week?
Let's see here. I'm going to pull up the post from your account as well. Go back here real quick. Are there any off the top of your head that stuck out that we need to address before I open this up?
I think one of the biggest ones was kind of, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit because it was about like a specific organization. I don't really like dealing into that too much, but just kind of how the NAIA can get kind of brand recognition amongst bigger lacrosse entities. And I think my thoughts on that are twofold. I think one, we have to do a better job of marketing from like an internal NAIA perspective. Because I got to say, sometimes I feel like the players, like we do more than 50% of that marketing. So
that's exactly it.
Do a little bit better. And then also I think we need to start being a little bit more selective as a kind of a community and the coaches. Like we can't schedule these D2 powerhouses as our lower tier teams and get beat 35-0, because I know you might think like, hey, it's a growth opportunity, but that team, that might be the only taste of NAIA lacrosse that team ever gets. So you never know when that takes a D1 job and then, oh yeah, NAIA, I think we beat their best team by 35-0 when he doesn't realize that was our worst team. So we need some of our bigger teams to maybe schedule. I'm not saying go out there and schedule like D2 top 10 teams, but like Reinhardt's, Cumberland's, Kaiser, Indiana Tech, maybe play upper middle level D2, D3 teams so they can see, oh man, those kids can really play. And then therefore kind of translate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this comment came from Steve Sorensen via Twitter. Yeah, I saw that there. Kind of what can we get for more recognition? I agree with you. I think a lot of it comes down to branding. We as an NAI, we're great across all sports. Every sport kind of has this awesome cult following like we do in lacrosse. I see it from the baseball perspective, from the football side. Guys take pride in NAI. They band together But if you're outside of that, likelihood is you don't know too much about the NAI. So we have to represent well the first take. And I think I do 100% agree with that. When you schedule a deep roster D2 team and you're a first or second year NAI team and you get smoked, that team then goes to social media and publishes it out there like we rolled this team. And there's as a recruit, just 4 years ago, there was a big debate for me and a lot of guys in my region whether was NAI a viable option, because we kept seeing these scores. And I know it happened out in Colorado. A team got beat by a ridiculous amount of goals by Colorado Mesa. It happens, but to avoid that, you build a roster and you go through a couple of years before scheduling a team that you're going to get rolled by in whether it be D2 or D3, because it happens on both sides. But we have to represent well from the first take, because we get that option to represent well. And it happens in NAI basketball. NAI basketball teams beat D2 teams all the time, easy. But with lacrosse still being newer in the NAI, we really have to take those moments, because they're golden when we get them, and be able to prove ourselves. Otherwise, whoever's watching those scores in those games, who are recruits that are balancing between D2 and NAI, like I was, those scores say a lot about your recruiting process, just because there's not a lot out there. And then I think from the media side as well, this is nothing specifically against the NAI. And I know they've gone through a lot of shifts on their media and their communication department. And so they're trying to figure out their landscape as well right now. But I think we need to see more from an NAI perspective and a national perspective on why lacrosse fits in the NAI so well. And this kind of goes back to even like my jab at the beginning of the episode that was more than anything a joke about the football championship shirts being kind of lame. Like, a lot of those little things are huge to recruits, and they're huge to building the brand of NAI sports, especially lacrosse. Because if you can show up and you're repping well as a coach in great gear, you're coaching well at recruiting events and tournaments, and you're putting your name on the map, you're not only representing your school well, but you're representing the entirety of the NAI well. Because my thought is, whenever a player is getting recruited to the NAI, chances are they're getting recruited by a lot of NAI teams. It's rare that a recruit for the NAI just gets recruited by one school. I mean, I see anytime we get a recruit at Clarke, they're getting hit up by Missouri Valley. They're getting hit up by Siena Heights. They're getting hit up by Cumberland's. You look at their Instagram or their Twitter and you see how many NAI schools are interested. So one school or one coach can have a huge impact on how a player and a family even feels about the NAI as a whole. So we've improved massive amounts, thanks to you and other people in the NAI community over these past 4 years, especially. We, leaps and bounds ahead of where we were 4 years ago. But with that being said, the more teams we add, the more opportunity we have to take those instant moments and make a good impression from the start. So I agree with you. I think especially for a major outlet like was referenced in this tweet, a major lacrosse entity, for them to really acknowledge us on a national scale, I personally think we have to prove it first. Like that's how it comes down to it. And the beauty is it is getting out there. I was talking to players yesterday that were like, hey, we've been playing a lot of these NAI guys. It's incredible. Like the pace is amazing. The roster sizes are amazing. They're blown away because they had no impression going into it. And they obviously had a great impression of the NAI from the start, which is what we need more of that. And this falls on you guys as players. And I can speak to myself as well. If you go to a box tournament like I did this weekend, or any other tournament out there in the off season, if you play well and you're wearing NAI gear, people are going to ask you about the NAI and your experience. So it's just as much your opportunity to raise and to elevate the reputation of NAI lacrosse. And that's what's going to grow it, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, could not agree with you more. And that kind of leads perfectly into the next question we got, which was what makes the NAI kind of a viable option, or just maybe even a superior option in some cases. And one of the things that came to mind right off the bat was just kind of roster sizes and how some schools allocate the scholarships. Because I know at the D1 level, there's a handful of guys who are typically like four-eyed guys, a couple on very small partial, and then a handful of walk-ons even as well. Whereas speaking with some NAIA coaches lately, some of them have told me their like average scholarship range could be up to $10,000. Like, and some even have that as like their floor. Like, we're not going to put anyone on our roster below 7-8 grand on scholarship, which is absolutely huge, because even when I was playing 4 years ago, that wasn't the case. So it just keeps getting better and better. I think that helps a lot. And then also the recruiting window, NAI doesn't really have to follow that, the hard deadlines. I don't know off the top of my head what the NCAA like reaches deadline wise, but NAI, you can kind of get recruited year round. So that's another advantage to it as well.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on this. I'm the world's biggest advocate to NAI lacrosse to anyone in my region that asks me about it. And I think the simple answer to what makes it a viable option, I can even loop this back to a conversation with a parent I was having yesterday. Their kid is being recruited everywhere from NAI to low Division I. They have the options everywhere. And I talked with this individual for probably the better part of an hour, explaining why I think NAI is a great option, especially for a player like we were talking about. And I think that what makes it so viable is that a lot of these players can make an impact from the start. Whether they're starting 4 years or not, that's going to be up to their ability and their dedication to their craft. But if they put the work in, you have the potential to start 3 or 4 years and play a lot of games and make a big impact and travel all over the place and have a really legitimate college lacrosse experience. And I think it's viable as well because as a lacrosse community, we've fallen into this mindset that it's D1 or D2 or bust. And if not that, it's high level D3, Salisbury, those kind of schools. And that's not very healthy because a lot of the times the parents and recruits don't have enough information on how those levels actually operate. Now you think Division I and you compare it to like a football or a basketball and you think, oh, Division I has all these full ride scholarships. When in reality, the bottom half of NAIs or the bottom half of Division I schools have a handful at most full ride scholarships. And a lot of those guys on D1 rosters are paying for their school entirely just to sit on the bench for 3 years. So you have to figure out your priorities, whether you want to just be a D1 lacrosse player and not play a whole lot, or if you want to go to NAI, be a complete baller, tear it up, have an incredible academic and athletic experience, and then go into coaching or whatever else it is. And I think the NAI is so viable because a lot of these schools offer incredible scholarships. A lot of them offer close, if not full scholarships. And if there's not money directly in the budget, there's a lot of schools that will go out of their way to find you extra academic money or grants, or the ability to find you more money to play lacrosse is so great at the NAI level. And on top of that, none of the schools are the exact same in the NAI. Like we were just saying, the restrictions aren't really there so much. There's schools like Cumberland's that cost close to nothing right away on just their tuition. And then there's schools that cost a lot. But the beauty of it is all those schools are going to base their scholarships on how much their tuition actually is, instead of just like a percentage of, hey, we're going to give this kid a full ride, this kid a full ride, this kid a full ride. They take those kind of things into mind. And I think that the second to biggest reason in my mind of why the NAI is viable is almost all, if not all, of NAI lacrosse right now is private schools. Their funding is private. They're almost all religious institutions, if not all of them. So they have money coming in from religious affiliations a lot of the time. There's money coming in from a lot of places and not just state funding like a lot of Division I schools. So when it comes down to it, private education and lacrosse, they kind of go hand in hand a lot of time. And I think the NAI highlights that in a great way. Plus, it's easy to start a program at a school. You don't have to jump through all these hoops to start a program. You can start a program, grab a good coach, and have a 25, 30-man roster your second year. Like, things happen fast in the NAI, and I think that's the beauty to it. But more than anything is it's a viable option because the more guys that get in it, the more the word gets out and the more players start to realize that this level of play is very high most of the time. And your experience is not just riding the bench for 4 years. Like, you're playing a lot of lacrosse and you're enjoying it. You're on the long bus rides. You're checking off every box you can need from a college lacrosse perspective. And that's what makes the NAI so viable.
Yeah, definitely. And one other thing I wanted to touch, kind of forgot for a second in that aspect, is that if you look at just like kind of the percentages, so like D3, D2 have well over 100 teams each, I want to say. So, and the amount of teams where, like, if we look at like a preseason media guide and go, do they actually have a chance? It might be 2%, 3% out of that 100 that we're saying, I could see them winning it this year. Whereas NAIA, we have maybe 40 teams on a given year. Then you look at it and you sit there, okay, top 5, they could win it. Okay, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I could see scenarios that they make it. And then there's a couple on the outside of the top 10 who are pretty dang solid as well. So, like, if you just want to play a percentage game, that's almost 25% with a legit chance every year competing for a title. So that's an astronomical margin, in my opinion.
It's huge, and programs in my mind in the NAI tend to grow and elevate as programs a lot faster than they do in D1, D2, D3. Most of the teams that you see winning in Division 1, Division 2, Division 3 have been around for 20, 30, 40 years. Like, they had tough years back to back to back to back before getting to where they are consistently now. Like, Syracuse didn't just come out of nowhere. Limestone just didn't come out of nowhere. Salisbury, right. Tufts, they didn't come out of nowhere. Like, they've been around for a very long time. And the expansion programs in those divisions, they struggle for a long time, for a lot more time than I think NAI schools do, because it's just the competition is anyone's game in the NAI. Like, it really is. It's how you build it out. And I mean, I think especially to the low tier Division 1 schools, they are struggling to win a game at a lot of those schools in any given year. Their players, they don't retain players very well at all. I look at Division 1 rosters in the low end, and if a player there has a good year at a low end D1 school, he's gone that next year. So you're not building much of a culture. You're not retaining players. Whereas the NAI, I mean, yeah, we see guys transfer. Like, we have to admit that there's no transfer portal, so it's a little harder to track. But normally, if guys leave an NAI school, there's a pretty good reason. And majority of the guys stay 4 years. They experience 4 years. They build a culture. They put back into that program. So I agree. I think the beauty of it is it really is anyone's game. We don't know who's going to win this year. Like, I think that's the craziest thing, is we don't know who's going to win this year. We don't even really know who's going to be the top of each conference this year, which is even more nuts. Not to mention these new teams that we have no idea what to expect from them. And that's like, that is the nostalgia, the beauty, the addiction to NAI lacrosse.
100%. Couldn't have said it any better. Were there any other questions that you got asked this week? I think
someone can see here.
Process.
Let's see. Well, I mean, I guess we can talk a little bit too. And I'm sure we have some recruits in here listening right now. And I know I saw comments from parents of kids who are recruits as well in the NAI. What was your NAI recruiting experience like? And I know yours was several years prior to mine, so it's good that we have two different versions. What was it like for you?
So mine's going to come even as more of a shock, I guess. I don't really talk about my background too much. So I actually, coming out of high school, I really didn't want to play lacrosse, weirdly enough. My senior year, I got mono. I went from 205 to about 170. Had to regain during the season. The spring break game, tear my LCL, play through it the rest of the year. And at that point, I was kind of primarily looking at, I don't want to name names, but 2 D3 schools. And then they kind of stopped talking to me because my senior year, it was okay. But I mean, when you have mono and a banged up knee, not really going to go too well. So I ended up actually going to Kennesaw State for about 2 years. And then, speaking about how funny the NAI recruitment process was, I ran into Kevin Barry. I don't know if y'all remember him. He was an All-American at Reinhardt, a couple years defenseman. Saw him at an LA Fitness, and he was like, "Hey man, you ever miss lacrosse?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm starting to miss it." And he was like, "I can probably get you a tryout." So I emailed Coach Snow, and he was like, "Have you been practicing? Have you been playing?" Oh yeah, I'm ready to go, thinking like a month or two before I need to come out there and try out. All right, see you Monday. So I'm like, oh my God. And I go out there and I end up making the team, getting a scholarship offer, and then boom, I'm at Reinhardt. So my recruitment process wasn't the typical by any means, but it was definitely an interesting ride to end up in the NAIA.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even know that, which I think makes your love of NAI lacrosse that much more interesting and awesome. But I mean, I think the same could be said for a lot of guys in the NAI. Like, things just fall into place, and there you are. And obviously I think that changes as teams grow and time goes on, and it's kind of weird. For me, I guess it would be more traditional, I guess you could say, of a recruiting thing.
Be hard.
I wanted to play college lacrosse since probably I was like, I think I started playing lacrosse when I was 11 or 12. So at like 13, 14, I had this in my mind, like, I'm going to play college lacrosse. And like, for lack of better terms, like, I was a chunky kid. I was a catcher in baseball. Like, lacrosse was a little bit different for me, but I jumped in head first, fell in love with it right away, and like made a mission, like, I'm going to play college lacrosse, and decided I was going to build my life around lacrosse. And so freshman year, obviously I was the last class that the recruiting rules were pretty loose still. And so, going into my freshman year, I was getting calls from D3 schools. And I think I was like 6'3" at the time. And so I was a big kid for that position for attack. And so a lot of D3 schools, some D2 schools, a few NAI schools, which at that point, especially, I didn't really know much about at all. And then the crazy thing is, like, as it went on and on and on, committed to a Division II school sophomore or junior year, and just kind of rode with that whole commitment idea. And then senior year, one day, former Clarke coach Ben WHAC gave me a call, and it turned out that he was from the same town as me in Ohio, and I just didn't know who he was, which was crazy. And so I was like, I'll come out to Clarke, I'll come see it. And I was like, I'm already verbaled somewhere, I'll have you know that, but I'm down to come see what it's about. And flew out to Chicago, got picked up, went to Dubuque, Iowa for a few days, and texted that coach that I was originally committed to, hey man, I'm decommitting and I'm going to Clarke. And here we are 3.5 years later, greatest decision I've ever made. And it's kind of like similar to you in a very unusual way. NAI lacrosse, just, it finds you. It's very strange how it works.
It does. And it's been kind of enjoyable to watch it grow and watch other players get recruited. And it's definitely started to get a little bit more conventional, because, I mean, if you think about it, my first year at Reinhardt was actually year one of NAIA. So we were actually competing SCLC and NAIA with SCLC in the MCLA. So I think that was part of the reason why I was a little bit weirder at times, just kind of managing both. But it's been nice to see. My brother's actually a senior now in high school, and he's kind of looking at some NAIA schools. So it's been fun to watch the process, getting to know coaches, stuff like that.
Yeah, it is. And I agree, though, it is, as time goes on and the NAI's reputation grows, things do become a little bit more traditional. I think the advice to any recruit is see as many places as you can, talk to as many coaches as you can, and fall in love with the community and the campus and not just the team. Because like they always say, and like I was always told, you go somewhere intending to be an athlete, you never know, God forbid that you're going to have an injury that takes you away from being an athlete. Be somewhere that you're going to love regardless of whether you're playing your sport or not. And I do think there's a lot of NAI schools now in great places, in great communities, that you can base it off of that now. And so we're seeing a lot more of that, which is really exciting and cool too. Here's a question. This is moving on from the recruitment side. Gavin Nelson asks us on Twitter, what is a good off-season practice? And I guess you can even reflect on your Reinhardt days a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of just kind of off-season practice, I kind of wonder if it means like team-wise, like kind of like a fall ball thing, or like summer routine. Because like a summer routine for me personally was kind of working out a lot, running a little bit. Definitely should have been running more, but a lot of weights. And then I would typically play in a men's league. We had a very big men's league down here, and it typically had a ton of D1 players in it. Even some like Blaze practice squad guys would drop in and play in it. So that's kind of what I did in the summer. As far as like off season, like fall ball at Reinhardt, we were going pretty hard. I can't lie. I mean, it wasn't nearly as hard as spring, but we took it pretty serious. I mean, it was pretty much like spring, but just a little bit less yelling, a little bit more friendliness. But I mean, we kind of had the vibe, at least in spring, like practice should be harder than games kind of thing. But in fall, it wasn't that way. It was a little bit more loose environment, if that makes sense. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think surely I think for sure the fall is rough and tough. It's never really fun. Uh, Personally, the fall is a grind because you have a heavier course load in the fall. That's how most of the schools set it up, and so you're balancing academics really heavily with practice. I know at Clarke, throughout the 3.5 years I've been there, through several coaches, it's been consistently like 3 days of practice and 3 days of lifts, and we normally will rotate that and then we'll stack one in the same day. You can expect to. I mean, I think we're probably giving maybe 8 to 10 hours a week in the fall of lacrosse time, like structured lacrosse time, I guess we could say. And it starts out, especially a lot of conditioning. This fall, we did a lot of 6 a.m.s, which was not very much fun, I'll be honest, but it's part of college lacrosse. Like, it's part of the experience. Barnes, I know you're watching this right now thinking, yeah, Tucker doesn't like 6 a.m.s. We get that. I know. That's a fact. I don't like mornings. But it is. And it goes from a grind in the fall to the later in the fall you get, the more relaxed it gets. You're doing pickup, you're doing West Jenny, you're doing 3-on-3, you're doing sixes. It relaxes a lot more, and that's all building towards the spring. But I will also adding the biggest thing about the fall, responding to Gavin's comment here, the biggest thing with the fall to me is that the fall and winter break are your time to put in that work that's going to prove what happens in the spring, especially out of practice time. Like, fall, I always think fall is my biggest time to hit the gym outside of practice and mandatory lifts. Like, I'm getting out there as much as I can. And right now, especially on break, break is all lacrosse and training for me, because that's your time when no one's focused on what's going on and you can kind of get ahead and work on it. So even though there's only 3 practices and 3 lifts a week, that time outside, your expectations should be high. Again, 6 a.m.s were the toughest part for me, but they made for great practices and we got better because of it. So I would say anyone looking at NAI lacrosse and college lacrosse as a whole, know that fall is going to start out kind of tough. And as time goes on and you guys are in better shape, things become more enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. And then one final question, I guess, that I remember someone asking was about kind of some of the top players over the last, I guess, 5 years or so. And I don't want to get too involved with like stats or anything like that, but it's kind of like players that kind of meet the eye test, what you've seen, what you've played with, stuff like that. And for me, I've definitely played with a lot of good players and I've seen a ton of good ones as well. I guess I'll start with ones I played with who were just like really special. And number one would definitely have to be Matt Webb in goal for Reinhardt. I mean, I played with him the first time when he was a senior in high school, kind of like in a men's league. And he was like making doorstop saves on like D1 guys. And he was sitting there with his Reinhardt helmet. And they're like, hey, are you sure you want to go there? Are you sure you're not trying to go elsewhere? I can probably get you to try. No, I'm good. So he was definitely up there. Austin Ambrose, who was the original Reinhardt goalie when I got there, another phenomenal one. Bennett Jarrett at attack, lights out. Connor Mills at midfield, another outstanding one. But then moving outside of Reinhardt, yeah, Will McKinney definitely starts with him. Probably the most athletic midfielder in maybe the history of NAIA. You got Barnes, kind of. I always thought Barnes was kind of like the poster boy for the NAIA for some reason when it started. And that man was lights out. I mean, I can think of one game where we were beating Missouri Valley by a couple of goals, and the next thing you know, like he gets like an inch of space, just rips one from like 20 yards out, and it's a goal. And we're just like, oh my gosh, man, you can't even give this kid anything. And then Aquinas had a couple great attackmen. Cam Rogers was something special 2 years ago when they went on that run to the championship game. Who comes out in your mind?
Yeah, I don't. It's crazy. I look back now on the past years, and I don't think. I guess I think of teams being really solid or support characters. Like, I don't. There's no one that really sticks out like crazy like that. Obviously, I got to play against Barnes. We matched up his senior year, my freshman year. It ended up in a 1-goal game at Clarke. It was Clarke for Missouri Valley. It was fun, and it was great now that I get to play under him. So Barnes is definitely up there, and I know he's smiling right now. I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. So Barnes, you heard it. Yes. So Barnes is up there for sure with me. And then I think especially I notice defensive players and goalies in particular, because those are the two players that I have to scout for and know what's going to happen on their end. I would think poles, especially, with me being a taller attackman, I can normally look at a roster and figure out who I'm going to be matched up with. Like it's normally pretty clear. And I think the one pole that really only played 1 year in the NAI, Elijah Gash, played at St. Ambrose. He's now at Albany. He's tearing it up at Albany. So shout out to him, doing NAI right, showing that you can go the NAI to D1 route. He's doing it. My freshman year, he and I were matched up. We were about the same height. It was an aggressive matchup. I think I got 1 or 2 on him, and then he stopped me 2 or 3 times. And so it was a good matchup he was very physical and knew how to play lacrosse technically. And then lo and behold, goes to Albany the next year. So a little crazy. He only played 1 year. Would have loved to see what else he could do in the NAI. But I think he's up there in my mind, especially for defenders. I think goalies as well for me kind of stick out. I don't know who this was, but my freshman year, Ottawa had a goalie who showed up complete eye black, all black tights, black cleats. The dude was menacing. And I don't remember his name, but very good goalie and played that in a very dominant way. So I think that he also kind of sticks out. Those are 2 players in my mind that I see a lot of really good polls and a lot of really good goalies, but especially they stick out to me as guys who can tear it up. And I know there's a lot of offensive players out there that do it too, but I definitely focus more on the defensive guys because I have to match up with them.
Yeah, and I think I'm kind of the opposite. Being a former pole, I'm like, oh man, this awesome attackman or this midi is going to be a handful. And one more I thought of, I can't think of his name because it's been so long, but Missouri Baptist had an unreal face-off guy who was also like their leading scorer for a couple of years, which is pretty rare.
Was it Austin Dahl?
Yes, that dude was.
Yeah.
I mean,
he is now the either head or assistant at Maryville, D2 in Missouri. And last I heard, he was playing a lot of men's box too. Same league as me, different regions box wise. He was tearing it up in box. Somebody told me that they thought he got an NLL tryout opportunity. I don't think anything became of it. I don't really know, but I know he's doing a really good job coaching at Maryville from everything I saw. But you said it and I was immediately like, yeah, I know who that is.
I mean, there was one, it was like the national tournament and they were down big. I want to say to Kaiser or somebody. And then it was just face off. He wins it, goes down, trucks somebody, shoots about 100 miles an hour, score. All right, 10 seconds later, wins a face off, dodges around to people, score. Like 2 or 3 of those in a row. And I mean, I think they ended up losing that game, but I was just like, man, this kid is phenomenal. If he had a little bit better supporting cast, like
that's it though. Like that's the thing. I feel like, we mentioned all these players and you look at like Division 1 or Division 2 even, there's like 110 players we could think of right away. And that's because there's consistency in players across rosters to have supporting cast and to have players to kind of pick you up, where I think that's still developing in the NAI. I think we'll get to that point, but right now a lot of teams kind of vary in what guys are actually doing. And so you have different outcomes from players that maybe would be lights out normally. So that's kind of an interesting factor as well. I'm even trying to think now, you brought up face-offs, and I feel like that's a developing thing in the NAI as well. We're starting to see a lot more true Fogos, like guys that are just 100% recruited as a Fogo. And I'm trying to think of anyone recently that I matched up with, that I've seen rather, Fogo wise, that are just crazy.
There's 2 in the AAC that I can think of, really even 3 now that Cubic has transferred down, but JR Sess at Reinhardt, he used to come up to our practices when he was like a junior and he put in work. Like he was beating some of our guys when he was in high school. And we're like, please stay committed. Please stay committed. And now he's putting in work. And then I think it's Cam Provines. I hope I got that name right off the top of my head.
That sounds right.
I think they went first and second team. So those are 2 that really stick out for me. I think Indiana Tech had a pretty solid one last year as well. I'm trying to think who else, but yeah, it's definitely been a big difference from kind of when I played, where there was a couple that were really good, and then it's kind of a big drop off to where now like everyone's pretty solid at face-offs.
Well, the Fogo position has developed in the past even 3 years in an insane way. But I'm seeing a lot more guys, true Fogos, committing that are making a huge impact. And I think especially at the NAI level, if you're a crazy good Fogo, you can determine how the game is going to go 100%. Because if you're getting the ball every single time going down, you have a good offense and you score right away, your momentum and tempo is going to change the entire game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. That's kind of one of those things I've always thought about. Like if there was ever like a fantasy player draft, like who would I take number 1 overall? And I think the answer has to be a good face-off guy is what you definitely need.
I'm gonna be typical, and I'm gonna say a good face-off guy and a good goalie. 100%. I think those two things, especially in the NAI, make a huge difference right away, because we see teams that were not very good. They add a good goalie and a Fogo, and they're top in their conference. Like that's all it takes, is those two impact players make the world of a difference from a start right away.
And if you want to go back to what we were talking about, Weber getting transfers earlier this year, they got one of my former teammates at faceoff now. So he'll be pretty solid at faceoff. And then that's Hunter Scott. He was Reinhardt's faceoff guy, I think 2 years ago. And then in goalie, they got like a D2, like former freshman All-American or something transferred in. So I'm like, well, he's going to be solid. So
no, seriously. And that brings up a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't know too much about the transfer, the non-existent transfer portal in the NAI right now. I think we're waiting for rosters to drop. I haven't seen many drop yet. I think by next episode, because this next 2 weeks here are going to be crucial for those rosters to be published by the SIDs. As soon as we see rosters published, we'll make sure to let you guys know on transfers. Because I know there's going to be some transfers that surprise us, especially with the 5th year and kids going to different grad schools and maybe going closer to home.
Yeah, 100%. And then, as we said, people were asking for top 10s. I mean, once we get that out there, that'll be a little bit easier, even for conference predictions. I mean, when we're doing our top 4, it's like, I think this is who's going to make it. Don't quote me on that when I'm completely wrong. And I look at a roster and I'm like, 10 of those guys I thought were going to be there aren't there.
It is. We're playing the wait. I'm checking almost daily on rosters just to see, because I'm curious as a current player in the KCAC how other KCAC teams will look. But I'm also looking at Kaiser and Reinhardt and a lot of these teams, saying, who'd they pick up in the offseason, who's not there anymore. Because there was a lot of inner NAI transferring going on this offseason, because I know of a lot of guys who are not at their former schools.
Definitely. And I guess I want to close out real quick. What can we expect from Clarke this year? Because I know it seemed like last year y'all had a lot of talent, but maybe not enough bodies at times. But from what I remember, it seemed like y'all had some Morningside guys transfer in or something, but they had to wait out because it was like an interconference year.
Yeah. So you got, those are two of my closest friends that they're watching right now, Connor and Alec. They both transferred over from Morningside. Obviously had to sit the year because of interconference travel within the KCAC. So they unfortunately set out last year. It's Connor Cole and Alec Colander. And they will both be on the offensive end this year. Alec is a midfielder, potentially long stick midi. And then Connor will likely be down in attack with me. And then we also have a kid coming back to college lacrosse who took a year off, also from the same town in Wisconsin. He'll be added to our offense. And then the rest is kind of like right now we're waiting on our final grades came in last week, trying to cement where we're at. I think this is the most talented team that we've had to date. I think our numbers are kind of right around they're always going to be. Obviously, pending what we find out in the next couple of days, we could be even a lot better than that. But skill wise, I am pumped to play with this team because our practices have been so lively. The ball has been flying around. The team chemistry, especially on offense, is very high. And then we have, we have an injured player returning as well. We have a new face-off guy, a true Fogo who is also a football player. So we got a football player and he's played his whole life as a Fogo. So that's exciting to have a true Fogo finally. And then we have Kendrick returning in goalie, who transferred over from Concordia 2 years ago, a buddy of mine from Michigan. So we're looking very solid, especially skill wise. Numbers are to be determined on what happens in the next couple of weeks here, but I'm pumped to see this version of Clarke lacrosse. You know, I came in my freshman year and I was one of three freshmen rather, and the rest were pretty much all seniors. So we graduated like pretty much a full team right after my freshman year. And that freshman year team I had was incredible. And that's when we hung with Moval by 1 goal. And it was like overtime. It was crazy. And that was great. But then graduated a lot of guys, kind of had to restructure and rebrand. And I think this is the first year since I've been there, since freshman year, that we're finally back at that talent level and that skill level. And it's an exciting thing to see. Like I said, we had those 6 a.m. practices and they weren't necessarily fun, but after the guys woke up for 20, 30 minutes, they had the music pumping until the neighbors called the cops on us. It was very enjoyable. And I'm really excited to see how this team meshes, because I think we probably have 4 or 5 who have not suited up in a Clarke lacrosse uniform yet. So they're big to be determined. And then we also got a freshman from Nebraska, real tall kid, about the same height as me, playing long stick. He's also a new addition. So it's a new chapter for Clarke lacrosse that I'm pumped about.
Yeah, and I think we can all say we're excited to see that. Anything else you think we haven't covered? I mean, I thought this was gonna, as I said last episode, I was expecting like 20 minutes, and here we are at like an hour. So.
Yeah, this is what happens when we start talking Naia Lacrosse. There was, like I said, there's a lot to talk about this offseason already. We're now coming into the next couple of weeks where things are going to heat up. That's all I have. I think we'll re-adjourn here in 2 weeks or so after Christmas, and we'll have probably a lot more news by then. Until then, unless you have anything, I say everyone has a wonderful Christmas, and hopefully get some fun lacrosse stuff, spend some good time with the family, and then here in about 3 weeks, we're right back on campuses getting ready for the season.
Yeah, happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you then.